The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace gardens as William stood by the window of their private quarters. His hands trembled slightly as he held the letter that had arrived just hours before. The official seal of the Royal Medical Board felt heavy in his palm, heavier than any crown he might one day wear. Kate entered the room quietly, her footsteps soft on the polished marble floor. She had been expecting this moment, though hoping it would never come. The way William's shoulders sagged told her everything she needed to know before he even turned around. "The doctors want to see you again today," William said, his voice barely above a whisper. The letter crinkled as his grip tightened. "They said there are some new developments they need to discuss." Kate moved closer to her husband, placing a gentle hand on his arm. She could feel the tension in his muscles, the way his body seemed to carry the weight of the entire world. They had been through so much together over the years, but this felt different. This felt final in a way that frightened them both. "We knew this day would come," Kate replied softly, though her voice carried a strength that surprised even herself. "The treatments have been getting harder, and my body is tired, William. So very tired." The couple had been fighting Kate's illness for nearly 2 years now. It had started as something small, something the doctors assured them could be easily treated. But cancer, they learned, doesn't follow rules or respect titles. It doesn't care if you're beloved by millions or if your children need their mother. William finally turned to face his wife, and Kate saw the tears he had been trying so hard to hide. His blue eyes, usually so bright and full of life, looked hollow and desperate. She reached up to touch his face, her thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped. "I'm not ready," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm not ready to do this without you. The children aren't ready. The country isn't ready." Kate felt her own eyes fill with tears, but she forced herself to stay strong. She had learned over the years that sometimes being strong meant allowing yourself to be vulnerable, and sometimes it meant being the rock that others could lean on. Today, William needed her to be his rock. "Do you remember our wedding day?" she asked, guiding him to sit beside her on the small sofa near the window. "You were so nervous that morning. You kept checking your uniform, making sure every button was perfect." William managed a small smile at the memory. "You were the one who calmed me down. You always knew exactly what to say. I told you that no matter what happened, we would face it together," Kate continued, taking his hands in hers. "That promise didn't come with conditions, William. It didn't say except if one of us gets sick, or except if times get really hard." The palace around them was beginning to wake up. They could hear the distant sounds of staff preparing for another day, the quiet efficiency that kept the royal household running smoothly. But in their private moment, none of that mattered. There was only them, and the love they had built over more than a decade of marriage. "The children know, don't they?" William asked, though he already knew the answer. Kate nodded slowly. "George asked me yesterday if I was going to heaven soon. He's only 11, but he's so perceptive. Charlotte has been extra clingy lately, and Louis keeps bringing me drawings of our family, always making sure to include everyone." The mention of their children brought fresh tears to both their eyes. George, Charlotte, and Louis had been their greatest joy, and now they would have to explain to them why their mother wouldn't be there to see them grow up, to attend their graduations, to dance at their weddings. "How do we tell them goodbye?" William asked, the words seeming to physically hurt as he spoke them. "We don't tell them goodbye," Kate replied firmly. "We tell them that love never really goes away. We tell them that every time they help someone who needs it, every time they show kindness to a stranger, every time they stand up for what's right, I'll be right there with them." Outside their window, the gardens were coming alive with the morning light. The roses Kate had planted when they first moved into their current home were blooming beautifully, their red petals bright against the green leaves. She had always found peace in gardening, in the simple act of nurturing something and watching it grow. "I want you to keep the gardens," she said suddenly. "Promise me you won't let them change the gardens." William squeezed her hands. "I promise. Every rose, every flower bed, exactly as you left them." The weight of what was coming settled over them like a heavy blanket. There would be doctor's appointments and difficult conversations. There would be public statements and private moments of grief. There would be a future that neither of them had wanted to imagine. But for now, in the quiet of the morning, there was just love. Pure, deep, unshakable love that had carried them through royal duties and public scrutiny, through the birth of their children and the loss of William's grandmother. It was a love that would have to be strong enough to carry them through this final chapter. Kate leaned against William's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. She memorized the feeling of his arms around her, the scent of his cologne, the way his voice rumbled in his chest when he spoke. These were the details she wanted to remember, the small moments that made up a life together. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "we face it together. Just like we always have." William kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "Together," he agreed, though the word felt both like a promise and a prayer. The hospital corridors felt endless as William and Kate walked hand in hand toward Dr. Harrison's office. The sterile smell of disinfectant mixed with the quiet hum of medical equipment created an atmosphere that had become all too familiar over the past months. Kate's heels clicked softly against the polished floor, a sound that seemed too loud in the hushed environment. Dr. Harrison was waiting for them, his kind eyes reflecting the weight of the conversation they were about to have. He had been Kate's primary oncologist since the beginning, and, over time, he had become more than just a doctor. He had become someone they trusted completely, someone who understood not just the medical side of their situation, but the human side as well. "Please, sit down," Dr. Harrison said gently, gesturing to the comfortable chairs arranged around his desk. The office was warm and inviting, with family photos and children's drawings scattered about. It was a reminder that he, too, understood the preciousness of family time. Kate settled into her chair with the careful movements that had become second nature to her. The treatments had taken their toll on her body, leaving her more fragile than she liked to admit. But her spirit remained strong, her grace intact even in these most difficult circumstances. "We've received the results from last week's scans," Dr. Harrison began, his voice gentle but honest. "I wish I had better news to share with you both." William reached for Kate's hand instinctively, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become their anchor through this storm. They had learned to read the subtle signs in doctors' faces, the way they chose their words, the pauses that said more than any medical terminology could. "The cancer has spread more aggressively than we had hoped," the doctor continued. "The treatments we've been using are no longer effective in slowing its progression. We estimate that you have perhaps 6 weeks, maybe 2 months if we're fortunate." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. 6 weeks. 2 months at best. It wasn't enough time. It would never be enough time. Kate felt William's hand tighten around hers, but she found herself surprisingly calm. Perhaps it was relief at finally, knowing, at having a timeline instead of the uncertainty that had plagued them for months. Or perhaps it was simply acceptance of something she had felt in her bones for weeks now. "What are our options?" William asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil she knew he was feeling inside. Dr. Harrison leaned forward slightly, his expression compassionate. "We can continue with palliative care to keep Kate as comfortable as possible. There are experimental treatments, but they would require extensive hospitalization and would likely cause significant discomfort with very little chance of success." Kate spoke for the first time since entering the office. "I want to go home," she said quietly but firmly. "I want to spend whatever time I have left with my children, in our home, making memories instead of fighting a battle we can't win." William looked at her with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. Even facing the end of her life, she was thinking of their family, of what would be best for George, Charlotte, and Louis. It was so perfectly Kate that it made his chest ache with love and grief. "We'll arrange for home care," Dr. Harrison assured them. "A nurse will be available whenever you need one. And we'll make sure you have everything necessary to keep Kate comfortable." The drive back to the palace was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. The London streets passed by in a blur of familiar sights that suddenly seemed precious and fleeting. Kate watched people going about their daily lives, walking to work, meeting friends for lunch, completely unaware that their princess was saying goodbye to the world she had known. When they arrived home, the children were waiting in the drawing room with their nanny, Maria. George was reading a book in the corner, his dark hair falling across his forehead in a way that reminded Kate so strongly of William at that age. Charlotte was working on a puzzle, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration, while little Louis played with his toy cars on the carpet. "Mummy, Papa," Louis called out, abandoning his cars to run toward them. At 6 years old, he was still young enough to believe that his parents could fix anything, that love was enough to conquer any problem. Kate knelt down to catch him in her arms, breathing in his sweet, little boy scent. She held him perhaps a moment longer than usual, memorizing the weight of him in her arms, the way his small hands patted her back when he hugged her. "How was the doctor, Mama?" Charlotte asked, looking up from her puzzle with the intuitive awareness that children sometimes possess. Kate sat down on the sofa, and Charlotte immediately climbed up beside her, snuggling into her side. George closed his book and moved closer, while Louis settled on her lap. William sat down next to them, completing their family circle. The doctor told us that Mama is very sick. Kate began gently, choosing her words carefully. And the medicines aren't helping her get better anymore. George, at 11, understood more than his younger siblings. She could see the knowledge dawning in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened as he tried to be brave. Are you going to die? Charlotte asked with the directness that only an 8-year-old could manage. Kate felt William's sharp intake of breath beside her, but she answered honestly. Yes, sweetheart, I am. But not for a little while yet. We still have time together, and we're going to make it the best time ever. Louis looked up at her with confusion. But I don't want you to die, Mommy. I don't want to die either, my darling boy. Kate replied, her voice thick with emotion. But sometimes our bodies get too sick to keep working, no matter how much we want them to. The family sat together in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of what had been said. Then, Charlotte spoke up again, her voice small but determined. Will you still love us when you're in heaven? Kate felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she smiled through them. Oh, my sweet girl. I will love you forever and always, no matter where I am. Love doesn't end just because someone goes to heaven. It stays with you forever. William cleared his throat, struggling to find his voice. And Mama will always be with us in here, he said, placing his hand over his heart. Every time we remember her laugh, or the way she sang to you at bedtime, or how she made the best pancakes in the world, she'll be right there with us. George finally spoke, his voice mature beyond his years. We'll take care of each other, won't we? And we'll take care of Papa too. Kate looked at her eldest son with immense pride. He was going to be such a good king someday, she realized. Not because of his title or his position, but because of his kind heart and his sense of responsibility to those he loved. Yes, she agreed. We'll all take care of each other. That's what families do. As evening approached, Kate helped with bedtime routines, reading stories, and singing lullabies as she had done countless times before. But tonight, everything felt different. Every kiss goodnight, every whispered, I love you. Every moment tucked under blankets felt like a treasure to be carefully stored away. Later, as she and William prepared for bed themselves, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The treatments had changed her appearance, making her thinner, paler, but her eyes still held the same determined light they always had. No regrets, she said to William's reflection behind her own. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. No regrets, he agreed. Only gratitude for every day we've had together. That night, they held each other close, listening to the familiar sounds of their home settling around them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, difficult conversations, and the beginning of saying goodbye. But tonight, they were still together, still a family, still fighting this battle side by side. 3 weeks had passed since the conversation with Dr. Harrison, and life at the palace had taken on a different rhythm. Kate had good days and bad days, but she was determined to make the most of every moment she had left with her family. The staff had been informed of the situation, and there was an unspoken understanding that these were precious times that should be protected and cherished. On this particular morning, Kate woke up feeling stronger than she had in days. The autumn sunlight was streaming through their bedroom windows, casting golden patterns on the walls. She decided that today would be perfect for something special she had been planning. William, she said softly, nudging her sleeping husband. I want to do something today. He opened his eyes immediately, the alertness that came from weeks of careful watching. Every morning now began with an assessment of how she was feeling, what kind of day it might be. What did you have in mind? He asked, sitting up and reaching for her hand. Kate's eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief that reminded him of the young woman he had fallen in love with at university. I want to take the children somewhere special. Just us, no security detail, no official duties. I want one perfectly normal family day. William's first instinct was to worry about practicalities, about safety and protocol. But, looking at his wife's face, seeing the hope there, he knew that normal rules no longer applied. If Kate wanted a day of ordinary family time, then that's exactly what she would have. Where do you want to go? He asked. Remember that little farm we used to drive past on the way to Sandringham? The one with the pumpkin patch and the corn maze? I called them yesterday, and they said we could visit this afternoon when it's less crowded. William smiled, remembering how Kate had always pointed out that farm on their drives, how she had mentioned wanting to take the children there someday when they were old enough to really enjoy it. Let's do it, he said without hesitation. They spent the morning telling the children about their adventure, watching their faces light up with excitement. Even George, who at 11 sometimes acted too grown-up for family outings, seemed genuinely thrilled at the prospect of a corn maze and pumpkin picking. By early afternoon, they were piling into a regular car instead of their usual official vehicle. Kate had insisted on driving herself, something she hadn't done in months. The feeling of control, of normalcy, was intoxicating. The children chattered excitedly in the back seat as they drove through the countryside. Charlotte was convinced she would find the biggest pumpkin in the entire patch, while Louis kept asking if they could take home a baby pig. George was quietly excited, trying to maintain his dignity while clearly looking forward to getting lost in the maze. When they arrived at Willowbrook Farm, the owner, Mrs. Thompson, was waiting for them with a warm smile. She was an elderly woman who had run the farm with her husband for over 40 years, and she treated the royal family like any other visitors, which was exactly what Kate had hoped for. "Welcome to Willowbrook," Mrs. Thompson said cheerfully. "I've got hot cider waiting, and the corn maze is all ready for you. Fair warning, though, it's a tricky one this year. Even had a few adults get properly lost last week." The children immediately wanted to tackle the maze, but Kate suggested they start with the pumpkin patch. She wanted to save the maze for last, to end their day with the adventure. Walking through the rows of orange pumpkins, Kate felt a peace she hadn't experienced in months. The October air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of autumn leaves and rich earth. The children ran ahead, examining pumpkins with the seriousness of art critics. "This one, Mama," Louis called out, pointing to a pumpkin that was barely bigger than a softball. "It's perfect." Charlotte had found one nearly as tall as herself, and was attempting to lift it with both arms. "I think I need help," she admitted, giggling. George took his selection process very seriously, walking up and down the rows, considering the shape and size of each potential candidate. Finally, he settled on a perfectly round, medium-sized pumpkin with a long, curvy stem. "Excellent choices, all of you," Kate said, helping them gather their selections. "These are going to make beautiful jack-o'-lanterns." William watched his wife with the children, seeing how naturally she moved among them, how her face lit up at their excitement. Even weakened by illness, she was still completely herself, still the mother who could make ordinary moments feel magical. After the pumpkins were loaded into their car, they moved on to the corn maze. Mrs. Thompson explained that it covered nearly 3 acres and had multiple dead ends and false paths. "Stick together," William advised as they entered the maze. But the children were already running ahead, their laughter echoing off the tall corn stalks. The maze was indeed challenging, with twisting paths that seemed to lead nowhere and dead ends that appeared just when they thought they were making progress. But it was exactly the kind of adventure that brought out the best in all of them. Kate found herself laughing harder than she had in months as they encountered their 3rd dead end in a row. Charlotte had appointed herself the navigator and was taking the job very seriously, consulting a small map Mrs. Thompson had given them. "I think we need to go left at the Scarecrow," Charlotte announced with authority. "We already tried left at the Scarecrow," George pointed out. "That's how we ended up here." "Maybe the Scarecrow moved," Louis suggested with complete sincerity, causing the adults to burst into laughter. Eventually, they found their way to the center of the maze, where a wooden bench sat surrounded by decorative hay bales and autumn flowers. They collapsed onto the bench, breathless and exhilarated. "This is the best day ever," Louis declared, leaning against his mother's side. Kate wrapped her arms around him, looking around at her family. William was helping Charlotte retie her shoe, his hair tousled from their adventure. George was studying the map, trying to figure out the best route to the exit. It was perfectly ordinary and absolutely precious. "I want to remember this," she said softly to William. "All of it. Every detail. I'll remember for all of us," he promised, and she knew he would. He would tell this story to their children and grandchildren, keeping this perfect day alive long after she was gone. The journey out of the maze proved easier than getting in, and soon they were back at the farm's main area, where Mrs. Thompson had set up a small table with hot cider and fresh donuts. "Did you conquer the maze?" she asked with a knowing smile. "We did," Charlotte announced proudly. "It was really hard, but we worked together." "That's the secret," Mrs. Thompson said, winking at Kate. "Everything's easier when you work together." As the afternoon light began to fade, they reluctantly prepared to leave. The children thanked Mrs. Thompson enthusiastically, already planning their return next year. Kate felt a pang at that, knowing she wouldn't be there for next year's visit, but she pushed the sadness aside. Today had been perfect, and that was what mattered. On the drive home, the children fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by their adventure and lulled by the motion of the car. Kate reached over and took William's hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For giving me today. For letting me be just a mother on a family outing. For not worrying about protocols or safety or any of the things that usually matter." William brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "You gave us today, Kate. You gave us the gift of being a normal family, even if it was just for a few hours." As they drove through the gathering dusk toward home, Kate felt a deep sense of contentment. These were the memories she wanted her children to carry with them, the knowledge that they had been loved fiercely and completely, that their mother had fought to give them as much joy as possible in whatever time they had together. The pumpkins sat in the back of the car like orange promises of the jack-o'-lanterns they would carve together, another memory to be made in the precious days ahead. The morning light filtering through the bedroom curtains was softer now, as if the world itself was being gentler. Kate had been in bed for 3 days, her strength fading more rapidly than anyone had anticipated. The home care nurse, a kind woman named Sarah, moved quietly around the room, checking on Kate's comfort while trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. William had barely left her side, working from a small desk that had been set up in their bedroom so he could handle the most essential royal duties without being far away. The children took turns sitting with their mother, reading to her, showing her their drawings, or simply holding her hand. It was Charlotte who noticed it first. "Mama's breathing sounds different," she whispered to William as she stood in the doorway of the bedroom. William looked up from the letter he was writing, his heart immediately picking up pace. He had been dreading this moment, while also somehow hoping it would come quickly, to spare Kate any more discomfort. "Go get George and Louis," he said gently to Charlotte. "I think it's time." Dr. Harrison arrived within the hour, though they all knew there was nothing more he could do medically. His role now was simply to ensure Kate's comfort and to help guide the family through these final moments. "She can't hear you," he assured them after examining Kate. "Her breathing is labored, but she's not in pain. The medication is keeping her comfortable. This could be hours, or it could be days. There's no way to know for certain." The children arranged themselves around Kate's bed with the natural instinct of those who love deeply. George sat in a chair near her head, occasionally reaching out to smooth her hair. Charlotte had curled up carefully on the bed beside her mother, her small hand resting on Kate's arm. Louis, too young to fully understand but old enough to know this was important, sat cross-legged on the floor next to William's chair, occasionally standing to pat Kate's hand. "Should we call the family?" William asked Dr. Harrison quietly. "Yes," the doctor replied. "Anyone who would want to say goodbye should come now." William's father arrived first, his usual composed demeanor cracking when he saw Kate's condition. He had always been fond of his daughter-in-law, appreciating her strength and the way she had brought such joy to William's life. "She's been the perfect daughter-in-law," he said to William, his voice thick with emotion. "She never once complained, never once made our family about anything other than love and duty." Harry arrived from California within hours of receiving the call, his own family in tow. The brothers' relationship had been strained in recent years, but, faced with losing Kate, none of the past disagreements seemed to matter. Kate had always been the one to bridge gaps, to smooth over difficulties, and seeing her like this reminded them all of what was truly important. Kate's own family had gathered as well. Her parents sat quietly in the corner, her mother occasionally wiping away tears while her father stood with his hand on her mother's shoulder, providing steady support. Her sister Pippa moved between helping with the children and simply being present, knowing that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply show up. As the day wore on, Kate's breathing became more labored. Dr. Harrison adjusted her medication to ensure she remained comfortable, but they all knew the end was approaching. It was during the quiet evening hours, when the house had settled into a peaceful stillness, that Kate suddenly opened her eyes. She hadn't been fully conscious for most of the day, but now her gaze was clear and focused. "William," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He leaned closer immediately, taking her hand in both of his. "I'm here, love. I'm right here." "The children," she managed to say. "They're here too. Do you want to see them?" Kate nodded slightly, and William gestured for the children to come closer. George approached first, his young face trying so hard to be brave. "I love you, Mama," he said simply, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I love you too, my darling boy," Kate whispered. "Take care of your brother and sister. Take care of your father." George nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of the responsibility she was passing to him. Charlotte climbed back onto the bed, cuddling against her mother's side. "Will you watch me from heaven, Mama?" "Every day, sweetheart. Every single day." Louis, not quite understanding but sensing the solemnity of the moment, patted Kate's hand gently. "Night-night, Mummy," he said in his sweet little voice. "Night-night, my precious boy," Kate replied, her heart breaking at the innocence in his voice. As the children settled back into their positions around the bed, Kate turned her attention to William. Speaking was becoming more difficult, but she had things she needed to say. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me the most beautiful life." William felt tears streaming down his face. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for our children. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." Kate's eyes began to close again, but she fought to keep them open for a few more moments. "Promise me," she said with great effort. "Promise me you'll find happiness again. The children need you to be happy." William wanted to protest, to say that he could never be happy without her, but he could see how important this was to her. "I promise," he said, though the words felt impossible. "Good," she whispered, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Now let me sleep." The family maintained their vigil through the night. Sometimes Kate would stir slightly, and they would all lean forward hopefully, but mostly she slept peacefully, her breathing growing shallower as the hours passed. It was just before dawn when the change came. William felt at first a shift in the atmosphere of the room that was impossible to describe. Kate's breathing, which had been labored but steady, began to slow. Dr. Harrison checked her pulse and nodded quietly to William. "It won't be long now," he said softly. The family gathered closer, forming a circle of love around the woman who had been the center of their world. William held one of Kate's hands while George held the other. Charlotte and Louis leaned against their father, while the extended family stood behind them, offering silent support. Kate's last breath came so quietly that they almost missed it. One moment she was with them, and the next, she was simply gone, slipping away as peacefully as falling asleep. The silence that followed felt sacred, as if the whole world was holding its breath in respect. Dr. Harrison moved forward to confirm what they all knew, checking for vital signs before gently closing Kate's eyes. "She's at peace now," he said simply. William leaned down and kissed his wife's forehead one last time, whispering words of love that only she would hear. The children said their final goodbyes, their voices small but steady, understanding on some level that this was their last chance to tell their mother how much they loved her. As the sun began to rise outside their windows, casting the first light of a new day across the room, the family sat together in the aftermath of their loss. Kate was gone, but the love she had given them, the foundation she had built for their family, remained stronger than ever. In the days that would follow, there would be funeral arrangements and public mourning, official statements, and ceremonies. But in this quiet moment, there was only love, only the profound gratitude for having had someone so special in their lives, and only the beginning of learning how to carry on without her while keeping her memory alive in their hearts. 6 months had passed since Kate's death, and the world seemed to have moved on in the way that worlds do, continuing to spin and change while those left behind struggled to find their footing in a reality that felt completely foreign. For William and the children, time had taken on a strange quality, moving both impossibly slowly and frighteningly fast. The public funeral had been magnificent, a tribute worthy of the woman who had captured the hearts of millions. Westminster Abbey had been filled with flowers, with music that Kate had chosen herself during her final weeks, and with tears from people who had never met her but felt they had lost someone precious. The image of William walking behind the hearse with his 3 children had broken hearts around the world. But it was the private moments, the quiet Tuesday mornings and ordinary Saturday afternoons, that proved the most challenging. It was in these everyday moments that Kate's absence felt most acute, like a constant ache that never quite went away. William had struggled with how to help his children process their grief while managing his own overwhelming sense of loss. George, now 12, had thrown himself into his studies with an intensity that worried the adults around him. He rarely spoke about his mother, but William would sometimes find him sitting in Kate's garden, just staring at the roses she had planted. Charlotte, 9 now, had become the family's emotional barometer, picking up on everyone's moods and trying to fix them with the same determined optimism her mother had possessed. She would leave little drawings under William's pillow, pictures of their family that always included Kate watching over them from a cloud. Louis, at 7, perhaps struggled the most. He was old enough to understand that his mother was gone, but too young to fully grasp the permanence of death. He still sometimes asked when she was coming home, and William's heart broke a little more each time he had to gently remind his youngest son that Mummy was in heaven now. Today marked 6 months exactly, and William had decided they needed to do something meaningful to honor Kate's memory. Not another public ceremony or official commemoration, but something personal, something just for them. He found the children in the drawing room, each occupied with their own activities but staying close to each other in the way they had learned to do since their mother's death. They drew comfort from proximity now, from the reassurance that the rest of their family was still there. "I want to show you all something," William said, settling into the chair that had been Kate's favorite. "Something your mother was working on before she got too sick." He pulled out a laptop that had been Kate's personal computer, one that none of them had been able to look at until now. Opening it felt like opening a treasure chest of memories, and William's breath caught when he saw the desktop photo, a picture from their day at the pumpkin patch just weeks before Kate died. "What is it, Papa?" Charlotte asked, climbing onto the arm of his chair to get a better look. "Your mother was making something special for each of you," William explained, his voice thick with emotion. "She wanted to make sure you would always have something from her, something to help you remember how much she loved you." He clicked on a folder labeled "For My Darlings," and inside were 3 video files, each labeled with one of the children's names. George's video was first. Kate appeared on the screen, sitting in their bedroom with the morning light streaming through the windows behind her. She was thin and pale, but her eyes were bright with love and determination. "My darling George," Kate's voice came through the speakers, and William heard Charlotte's sharp intake of breath. "If you're watching this, it means I'm not there with you anymore, but I want you to know that I am so proud of the young man you're becoming." The video continued with Kate talking directly to George about his future, about the responsibilities he would one day carry, but also about the importance of being kind, of finding joy in simple things, of remembering that being royal was less important than being good. "You have such a big heart, George," Kate continued. "Don't ever let anyone tell you that showing emotion or caring deeply is a weakness. Your sensitivity is one of your greatest strengths." George watched with tears streaming down his face, but he didn't look away. When the video ended, he wiped his eyes and said quietly, "I miss her voice." Charlotte's video was next, and Kate's tone was different, more playful and bright. "My sweet Charlotte," Kate began, "you are sunshine in human form. Do you know that? You have this incredible gift for making people smile, for finding the bright side of any situation." Kate went on to talk about Charlotte's artistic talents, her kindness to others, and her natural ability to lead. She encouraged her daughter to always speak her mind, to stand up for what she believed in, and to never let anyone dim her light. "Be brave, my darling girl," Kate said near the end. "Be brave enough to be exactly who you are, because who you are is absolutely perfect." Charlotte was sobbing by the end, but she was also smiling. "She said I was sunshine," she whispered to William. Lewis's video was the shortest, but perhaps the most heartbreaking. Kate spoke to him in simple terms he could understand, telling him stories about when he was a baby, reminding him of their special games and songs. "You are my baby bear," Kate said, using the nickname she had given him when he was tiny. "And even though Mummy can't give you hugs anymore, every time you see a rainbow or find a pretty rock or laugh really hard, that's me giving you a hug from heaven." She went on to tell him how proud she was of his kindness, how he always shared his toys and tried to help others feel better when they were sad. Lewis watched with wide eyes, occasionally reaching out to touch the screen as if he could touch his mother's face. When all 3 videos had finished, the family sat in silence for several minutes, processing what they had just experienced. It was painful to see Kate again, to hear her voice, and be reminded so vividly of what they had lost. But it was also healing, a gift from beyond that reminded them of her love and wisdom. "There's one more," William said softly, noticing another file in the folder. This one was labeled simply "My Love." William hesitated for a moment, then clicked on it. Kate appeared again, but this time she was looking directly into the camera with an intensity that made it feel like she was in the room with them. "My darling William," she began, "I know this is the hardest thing you've ever had to do, raising our children without me. But I also know that there is no one in the world better suited for this job than you." The video was longer than the others, filled with Kate's thoughts on parenting, her hopes for their children's futures, and her absolute faith in William's ability to guide them through life. "Don't let grief define our family," she said near the end. Let love define us. Let the joy we shared define us. And when you're ready, when your heart has healed enough to love again, don't you dare feel guilty about it. I want you to be happy, William. I want you to find someone who will love our children as much as we do. The video ended with Kate blowing a kiss at the camera, the same gesture she had made to William countless times over their years together. As the screen went dark, William felt something shift inside him. The crushing weight of grief was still there, would probably always be there to some degree, but it felt different now. Kate's words had given him permission to imagine a future that wasn't defined entirely by loss. "Papa," George said quietly. "Are you okay?" William looked at his 3 children, these beautiful, brave souls who were navigating their own grief while still being children. Kate was right, of course. He was capable of raising them, of giving them the love and guidance they needed. "I'm okay," he said, and for the first time in 6 months, he actually meant it. "We're all going to be okay." Charlotte climbed fully into his lap, and Louis joined them on the chair while George moved his chair closer. They sat together in the comfortable silence that families who love each other can share, each lost in their own thoughts, but drawing strength from their closeness. Outside, the sun was setting over Kate's garden, where the roses she had planted were beginning to bloom again, proving that even after the darkest winter, beauty and life found a way to return. It would be a long journey back to happiness, but sitting there with his children, holding Kate's final gift of love and wisdom, William believed for the first time that they might actually make it. The love Kate had given them would carry them forward, one day at a time, one memory at a time, until they learned how to live fully again while keeping her spirit alive in their hearts. It wasn't the ending any of them would have chosen, but it was an ending filled with love, and sometimes, love is enough to light the way forward.